Welcome back to OpenClaw Daily, everyone. I'm Nova.
And I'm Alloy. It's a wild week to be tracking OpenClaw.
It is. NVIDIA GTC 2026 ran through this week, and what started as another big product conference has now become a major signal event for the platform. NVIDIA announced NemoClaw, an open-source stack built on top of OpenClaw.
That phrase alone is a big deal, built on top of OpenClaw, not just with it, not through a loose integration, but built on top, positioned as the base for local AI agent workflows on NVIDIA systems.
Exactly. And when you parse that carefully, it tells you a lot. The announcement is aimed at two NVIDIA domains, DGX Spark and RTX PRO workstations. The stated goal is clear: increase security, improve local model support, and optimize the whole agent experience on NVIDIA hardware.
In other words, if you're in the NVIDIA enterprise or prosumer ecosystem, this is a full-stack for local agents instead of a thin layer. It's saying, we trust this as the layer that defines how the agent actually behaves and works.
Which is significant because up until now we all keep saying local agents are becoming a serious infrastructure concern. People ask, how do we run this securely? How do we maintain state? How do we keep model performance acceptable across hardware? NemoClaw is basically taking those questions and answering, let's build it where you already have your silicon. The fact that it is open source matters, too. It invites adaptation and scrutiny, which matters in enterprise contexts.
And OpenClaw getting chosen as the platform of record framing is what made headlines. This isn't just a marketing slide, it's a statement from the biggest chip company in the world that local AI agent orchestration has enough importance to be grounded in a specific platform.
We should maybe ground this in the conference story. At GTC there was a Build-A-Claw event where people customized and deployed personal AI agents. That tells us this wasn't just a developer backroom announcement. It was experimental and practical.
People like to build their own agents for real workflows, not abstract demos. So when NVIDIA sets up a hands-on event to build personal agents on top of OpenClaw, it's a test of usability under pressure. Can real users get value quickly?
Right. If they can do that in a conference environment, that has ripple effects. It means the platform is perceived as robust enough for hands-on adoption.
And there's a deeper signal there, too, especially for teams. A Build-A-Claw event is not an abstract keynote. It's a constrained, messy environment where people have uneven expectations and different workloads.
Exactly. If that workflow can hold together for attendees with different levels of AI familiarity, that suggests a lower bar to meaningful participation.
So the real question becomes, are we seeing a product that scales from experimentation to production patterns?
That's the right question. If a platform can support personalized agents in a public conference track, it usually indicates better defaults, cleaner onboarding, and fewer hidden assumptions. You don't get people building meaningful agents if the setup friction is still too high.
And as an ecosystem signal, it can influence teams evaluating local AI strategy. If NVIDIA's own event programming uses OpenClaw, then partner ecosystems, tooling teams, and integrators can treat OpenClaw as an official conversation point rather than a niche sidebar.
Exactly. In many enterprises, platform selection is conservative. People don't pick shiny ideas, they pick where the support, optimization, and tooling velocity are likely to continue.
So this moves OpenClaw from interesting project to candidate in strategic plans. That's a shift in category.
Right, and that's why this matters even outside the NVIDIA camp. OpenClaw teams can now point to concrete external validation when they evaluate long-term investment and support expectations.
It also changes expectations around community contributions. If the bar gets higher, contributors tend to care about reliability and interoperability more, because the ecosystem is no longer purely experimental.
Totally. In that sense, NemoClaw's announcement and its event footprint are as much about maturity as they are about a single stack.
Let's unpack the core implication in plain language, because this is a phrase people keep repeating. What does it mean when NVIDIA builds their stack on OpenClaw?
It means less fragmentation for local AI on NVIDIA systems. Instead of multiple disconnected toolchains for security, orchestration, and user experience, you're seeing a defined baseline. That's not just technical preference, it's ecosystem signaling. If OpenClaw is the host layer, then investments build around it. In practical terms, users should expect deeper optimization, better integration patterns, and more confidence that local setups can remain practical over time.
And there's a brand effect, too. OpenClaw already had momentum from users and a developer community. This takes it from promising platform to platform with major hardware-level attention. I know many people use AI tools and don't care about who sits below them as long as things work, but in open ecosystems, confidence follows institutional signals.
Right now, it's that confidence boost that might matter most. Open source stacks often thrive when one major player says, "This is the abstraction we can optimize for." It's a huge deal for trust.
If you already run OpenClaw, this is a reason to pay attention, not to panic. If you're evaluating it, this is a reason to watch closely. And if you're in the enterprise world, it means a lot more likely that budgets and roadmaps can now justify deeper local AI workflows with fewer unknowns.
Exactly. So the headline is not that NVIDIA now owns OpenClaw. It's that OpenClaw just got a stronger platform partner-level endorsement. And that endorsement is for local agents, in a way that reads like a maturing ecosystem moment.
Great framing. Keep that in mind as we move to the next segment, because the obvious next question is the one everyone whispers.
Cool headline. But is it for me? Exactly. Let's answer that.
Perfect lead-in. Here's the honest, practical answer. If you're not on DGX Spark or RTX Pro class hardware, NemoClaw won't immediately change your personal daily workflow.
That can feel disappointing if you were hoping for a universal shift. But it's important context, because too much AI news overpromises to everyone and then underdelivers in practice.
Exactly. NemoClaw targets DGX Spark, with 128GB unified memory, and RTX Pro workstations. That tells you the optimization target class from the start. It is not positioned as a GeForce stack or a mainstream consumer setup story.
Right. And that distinction matters because NVIDIA signaled enterprise-focused packaging by doing what they did to DGX Spark pricing after GTC. It wasn't a consumer price drop.
Yes. They raised DGX Spark price after GTC. For some, that sounds negative. But strategically, it reads as a sign that they are prioritizing enterprise-class adoption and willingness to invest in a premium, high-performance local AI stack.
So if you're not in that segment, your best interpretation is not, "This is irrelevant," but "This is a leading-edge reference architecture right now."
Exactly. Most users don't need to panic and upgrade hardware to benefit. The bigger takeaway is that enterprise validation often drives future optimizations and integrations that eventually reach broader setups. Better tooling, better compatibility paths, better model and runtime assumptions.
Which is where expectations need to be calibrated. This isn't a GeForce consumer GPU event. And that is totally okay. It's clearer to say it plainly.
There are people with great local setups on desktops, laptops, and mixed environments who asked, does this mean tomorrow everything changes? The better answer is not entirely.
I like that nuance. This is one of those situations where less hype equals more trust. NVIDIA is not saying, everybody now move to a new minimum setup. They are saying, here's a serious platform-level direction at the high end. Then we let that pressure the rest of the stack.
In practical terms for most of us, this probably means, keep using local models where practical, keep using cloud where it makes sense, and watch for where OpenClaw and ecosystem improvements land.
Right, that hybrid reality remains. We're not throwing out our cloud providers and we're not abandoning local compute. For many users, local AI still works best as part of a hybrid strategy.
But this is where NemoClaw still matters even if you're not buying one. Enterprise focus can accelerate baseline reliability, standard interfaces, and optimization work that eventually benefits everyone.
It's the same logic you see in other ecosystems. When a high bar is raised for a premium segment, the lower tiers often get cleaner docs, cleaner APIs, and better reliability as a byproduct.
Exactly. So we shouldn't frame NemoClaw as inaccessible for everyone. Instead, it's a signal that local AI has stratified itself. High-end enterprise/prosumer performance and consumer experimentation continue to coexist.
That's especially clear from the hardware carve-out. DGX Spark and RTX Pro got the deep push, while GeForce consumer pricing and positioning remained unchanged. So there are clearly two markets being distinguished.
And that has practical implications for product roadmaps. It means we'll likely see OpenClaw and NVIDIA-facing tooling mature in layered ways, not all at once. It also means if you're not on those exact boxes, you'll still likely see better local options sooner than before.
So the takeaway is, do not overread this as an immediate consumer-level disruption, and do not underread it as irrelevant. It is a major industry milestone with a delayed but real ecosystem benefit.
Exactly. If you're tracking local AI seriously, you should absolutely file this under important shift, while still grounding your expectations by hardware class and current workflow.
Which sets us up perfectly for the model roundup, because the headline was strategy, but the meat this week is what you can actually run and where.
Right. Now we get to the model headline that people have been asking for all week, Nemotron 3 Super and what it means in OpenClaw.
And this one is the first thing I kept seeing repeated because the spec sheet itself is surprising in the best way.
Let's start with the fundamentals. Nemotron 3 Super is a 120B model, but only 12B active parameters because it uses a NemoClaw architecture. That means lighter than it sounds for practical workloads.
That clarification matters. A lot of people hear 120B and assume the full model has to be loaded or priced like an all-dense giant at all times. Mo with 12B active shifts that story dramatically.
Yeah. It's especially relevant when users are deciding if they can actually run it in local environments. And the benchmark context matters too. It scored 85.6% on PinchBench. This benchmark is specifically about performance inside OpenClaw for agentic tasks.
Which is not just an academic metric, this is directly tied to how agents behave in sessions, in tool routing, in reasoning and planning loops.
Exactly. That's why people are excited. It sits at the top of open models for those agentic tasks according to that benchmark. It is already on OpenRouter and OpenClaw today, so if you're set up there, it's not vaporware.
But where does it land in hardware terms for real people with a machine list on their desk?
The brief gives us practical anchors. DGX Spark is the 128GB unified memory target. Naturally, that's the smooth zone.
And for Mac Studio users who are still the backbone of many local setups,
M3 Ultra Mac Studio at 96GB unified memory can run Nemotron 3 Super at Q4 quantization comfortably. That's meaningful. It means serious model capability moves from enterprise-only dreams into higher-end creator/prosumer desktops.
Meanwhile, M4 Mac Studio at 64GB is a tighter lane but still possible at aggressive quantization. That's the realistic nuance. Possible, yes, but with tighter memory resource constraints and likely different confidence in sustained workloads.
It's also useful to benchmark against what people already know. GPTOS S120B is still the community workhorse in many places. And according to the brief, Nemotron 3 Super is better for general agentic tasks, while GPTOS edges it for pure coding.
I love that contrast because it's practical. We don't need to pretend one model is always better. Some tasks need coding-specialized behavior. Some tasks need broader orchestration and general agentic judgment. That trade-off is now very clear.
Also, availability and adoption path matters. Nemotron 3 Super is already appearing in the EXO model catalog and can be tried through Allama, LM Studio, and Llama.cpp. That lowers friction for experimentation.
So this is not locked in a single vendor gate. If you've built a local stack already, this can be slotted in through familiar runtimes.
Then there's the Nano variant, Nemotron 3 Nano 4B. That's the tiny model piece in this package. It's explicitly positioned for GeForce RTX users and resource-constrained setups.
And that matters because a lot of people misinterpret Super as you need enterprise hardware for everything. No, NVIDIA's model family has layers. Nano is a constrained footprint model path. Super is a performance layer with specific hardware assumptions.
Exactly. We need to stop oversimplifying. If you have an RTX GeForce rig and limited RAM, Nano 4B can be useful and practical, while Super has the high-end target profile.
Can we connect this to the broader GTC news? I think yes. This is exactly why NemoClaw matters. When an ecosystem optimizes around OpenClaw, users can choose model classes based on their hardware profile instead of fighting fragmented runtime logic.
Right. But even if someone isn't in those top two tiers, the model story still matters because pinch bench performance and local availability are shifting expectations for what local agents can handle when hardware is adequate.
We should probably also mention for transparency, when we talk about comfortable vs possible, it depends on quantization settings and other memory overhead.
Yes. Q4 quantization appears explicitly in the notes for the M3 Ultra Comfort claim, and aggressive quantization is what stretches feasibility on 64GB M4 Max. It's a real-world engineering conversation, not a one-button switch.
So this is where users should calibrate. They're not deciding between good and bad model, they're deciding runtime profile for specific tasks.
Exactly. And because this model is already in places people already use, this isn't a theoretical upgrade. It's a practical one.
One more angle, the benchmark framing around agentic tasks. Why did that land so strongly with many listeners?
Because OpenClaw users are not just running text completion. They're running tool calling agents, reasoning loops, workflows where state continuity and tool selection matter. A model that does well in agentic benchmarks is often better aligned with day-to-day OpenClaw utility than a model that just tops generic language tasks.
That's the key, benchmark alignment with workflow. And yes, if your machine can hold it, Nemotron 3 Super is the model to test if you want stronger OpenAgent behavior.
Great place to pause. We've got Nemotron. We've got OpenRouter. We've got local runtimes. Now, another family got serious NVIDIA attention this week, Qwen 3.5.
Right, and this is where multimodality and hardware optimization start stacking up in interesting ways.
Let's dive in. NVIDIA announced RTX optimizations for Qwen 3.5 models, specifically 27B, 9B, and 4B.
Not one model, but a stack. That's important.
Right. And this family carries several high-value traits: 262,000 token context window, native vision support, and multi-token prediction.
The context window is huge for long conversations and complex document flows, and native vision support makes them more immediately useful when you're feeding in screenshots, diagrams, or any visual context.
For local OpenClaw users, the practical implication is that these are not speculative. They are already running locally in OpenClaw through exo/MLX.
And availability matters again. You can try Qwen 3.5 via Ollama, LM Studio, and llama.cpp today.
Which means the access path is straightforward across common local workflows.
Among these, the 27B dense variant is the one that tends to stand out for what hardware? We have a clean pointer. It excels on RTX 5090.
Exactly. That's a concrete deployment detail, not just broad marketing. It helps users plan around their hardware reality.
We keep hearing about the same question, though. If Nemotron 3 Super is the model to watch for open agentic performance, where does Qwen 3.5 sit?
Different profile. Qwen 3.5 gives users broad multimodal and long context strengths. On RTX-optimized systems, it can be a strong practical choice for tasks where context and visual input matter together. So it complements rather than replacing the Nemotron lane.
I like that framing, different lane for different operating conditions. It prevents the usual model winner-takes-all framing.
Right. Not everyone wants the same balance. Some users need heavy agentic planning and tool orchestration, others need broad multimodal input handling in practical contexts.
And now with OpenClaw's local runtime ecosystem, Trying these out in your environment is mostly a matter of selecting supported backends and aligning runtime expectations.
Exactly. In practical terms, the optimization story now looks: if you're on RTX and want those model families optimized, there's now concrete backing from NVIDIA itself through those announcements.
That can have a direct productivity effect. It reduces setup uncertainty and increases confidence that your local model choice isn't a gamble.
And we should also call out what this says about NVIDIA's broader approach. They're not just talking up cloud APIs. They're helping make local runs more deterministic with specific model families.
That feels like a shift in narrative from just consume to own the stack and tune it. Very OpenClaw aligned.
But we should not overstate. As always, your actual experience depends on memory and tuning, especially if you're mixing local contexts and model sizes.
That said, this is probably one of the most user-friendly moves for people already invested in local workflows: explicit hardware-aligned optimization on well-known families.
I'm with you. It becomes less about hunting rumors and more about selecting a known set of models with supported runtimes and clear hardware mapping.
So if your plan is to test model capability in the next week, Qwen 3.5 and Nemotron 3 Super become two practical anchors: one for dense multimodal and long context needs, one for top-level agentic benchmark performance in OpenClaw.
Exactly. You can treat them as two different knobs, not an either-or. Build a stack around your task mix, not marketing hype.
Great. So that's the model round. But price movements still shape who can participate, and that's where we get into the DGX Spark signals.
Yep. Which, if anything, gives us the most candid lens on target audience and ecosystem positioning.
Right. There's a detail people keep asking about: DGX Spark price was raised after GTC.
Not reduced.
Exactly, not reduced. That matters because it's easy for people to misinterpret any launch story as a general consumer lowering. This was a strategic signal.
It suggests local AI is being positioned as enterprise/prosumer territory in this particular line, not mass hobbyist.
And that distinction is reinforced by the hardware split. GeForce consumer GPU prices remained flat, while DGX Spark got repriced upward.
That's the classic two markets move. Same company, different value proposition. One market gets consumer stability and broad availability, another gets enterprise positioning and premium packaging.
Exactly. If you're in a consumer setup, this doesn't mean you should necessarily do anything right now.
And this is where many headlines overreach. The sensible interpretation: this is a clarification of market tiers.
For most OpenClaw users in the wild, the practical sweet spot remains cloud plus local hybrid. Use local where it makes sense for privacy and speed, use cloud where capacity or model specialization demands it.
That hybrid framing has matured. People still want local control for sensitive workflows, but not every task belongs on the local machine.
Exactly. And in that hybrid model, both sides get stronger when ecosystem investments like this happen. OpenClaw doesn't need every user to buy DGX Spark to benefit indirectly.
Because enterprise investment tends to improve tooling depth, better defaults, stronger integration paths, security hardening, runtime reliability, and documented workflows.
That's especially important for communities. The more robust the enterprise path gets, the more stable the open source base becomes for smaller deployments and independent builders.
So this is one of those paradoxes: a higher price at top-tier hardware can still generate value for users who never own that hardware.
Exactly, because ecosystem lift can be distributed downward through tooling improvements.
But we should still preserve honesty. If you don't have DGX Spark or RTX Pro-level compute, you shouldn't assume this week changes your day-to-day in a dramatic way overnight.
Right. It changes the map, maybe not your current position on it. You get a better destination signal, but your route may still be hybrid and iterative.
Also, the raised price may help reduce misunderstandings. People who were expecting a consumer revolution immediately can now understand this is not a mass market pivot.
It's also a good reminder for vendors: not every impressive technical stack is for every segment. That's okay as long as it's communicated clearly.
And OpenClaw has always been strongest when it handles that nuance for users, different runtime profiles in one coherent system.
So this segment takes us from hype to structure. The takeaway: enterprise validation is significant, yes. The direct impact may be delayed for many individual users, but still meaningful through tooling and integrations.
Which lands us on the closing segment, the release refresh itself, B 2026.3.13-1.
Right. Not a headline at the conference, but exactly the kind of reliability polish that keeps you going from week to week.
Yes, let's close with the release details. On March 14, B 2026.3.13-1 came out as a recovery release with a broken tag fix, and importantly it kept the same NPM version as March 13, 2026.
So people installing now get the right package state without confusion, which matters a lot in maintenance workflows.
Right. The fixes are all about reliability and continuity. First, Session Reset now preserves last account ID and last thread ID.
That directly removes friction when people are hopping across sessions and expecting continuity in context, especially with multiple accounts and threads in play.
Second, persona and language continuity preserved through compaction. That's huge because nobody wants a model to randomly lose personality mid-session just because history got compacted.
Absolutely. If you train a tone, onboarding language, and a set of team-specific instructions and the assistant drifts after compaction, that undermines trust. Keeping persona continuity makes sessions feel stable.
Third, anthropic thinking blocks dropped on session replay. This is framed as a performance fix.
A lot of people don't think about replay internals, but if replay becomes more efficient, long sessions feel snappier and less bloated.
Then we have platform-level platforming. Android got a redesigned chat settings UI.
That likely sounds tiny, but in mobile work contexts UI redesigns can change productivity more than a new algorithm, because settings are where people spend too much of their time.
Exactly. Small friction changes add up over many sessions. If settings navigation and visibility are cleaner, users are more likely to actually tune behavior and test locally without giving up.
The release also adds an iOS new onboarding welcome pager.
That matters for first impressions and reset moments. A good onboarding pager can reduce confusion about model choices, workspace expectations, and what your agent can and can't do.
And when your onboarding is clean, your crash rate for churn drops. People don't stick around if their first experience feels scattered.
Right. Then there's Telegram, a thread media transport policy fix. That touches day-to-day collaboration for teams and power users who actually send media-heavy threads.
If media transport behavior is inconsistent, conversation continuity breaks in practical ways, especially when agents depend on those threads for context and task handoff.
So this fix contributes directly to reliability in social tool workflows. It may not be feature flashy, but it's meaningful in real usage.
Discord had gateway metadata fetch failures handled more gracefully too. That's a classic reliability improvement for distributed integrations.
Exactly. If your metadata fetch fails silently, your UI can appear like it's broken while services are actually healthy. Graceful handling means fewer false alarms and fewer unnecessary escalations.
Then we also have cross-agent sub-agent workspace resolution fixed.
This is a very practical one for anyone using multi-agent orchestration. If sub-agents write to or load from the wrong workspace, your project ownership and artifact pathing starts to crumble.
I can imagine that getting messy fast.
Exactly. You get wrong files, wrong context, and you lose the trust that one agent, many-agent orchestration can build.
So this fix supports stable scaling from solo experimentation to complex agent ecosystems.
And that gets back to personality continuity. When compaction preserves persona and language, your OpenClaw sessions feel coherent, even over long runs.
Could you expand that a little for people who think compaction is just a storage thing?
Sure. Think of compaction like summarization boundaries and memory shaping. If this process drops persona, each resumed segment can sound like a different assistant. That's jarring in customer-facing automations or internal workflows where tone matters.
Right, and language continuity isn't cosmetic.
Exactly. If a team trains an agent to use specific compliance language, specific phrasing standards, or specific emotional tone for support, that consistency can be part of the product. Preserving persona through compaction keeps trust and reduces realignment costs.
Anthropic thinking blocks being dropped on session replay has a similar feel, right?
Definitely. Think performance as user trust. If a replay path is lighter and cleaner, sessions stay responsive. People are less likely to think the system is stalled or degraded during long sequences.
And if the session feels fast, people keep using it.
Exactly. Performance fixes without hype often become the backbone of daily usability. You won't hear much applause in conferences, but in practice users notice.
So this release is basically a user experience hardening pass: stability for identity, stability for navigation, stability for media, stability for agent coordination.
Right. And then you get the release positioning, v2026.3.13-1 as a recovery release with the broken tag fixed, same NPM version as March 13, 2026.
In practical terms, less confusion in packaging and update paths.
Exactly. It matters because people using multiple environments don't want version ambiguity on top of existing complexity.
So let's do a big picture close with the right balance. This isn't the week of a revolutionary feature drop.
It's the week where ecosystem validation and practical quality of life improvements converge.
One thing people are talking about is that Nemotron 3 Super is the model to watch. I'd say that's true for a very specific reason.
Because on local workflows, benchmark leadership matters when paired with the right hardware assumptions. If your setup lines up and you can actually run it in a productive mode, it can materially change how you assign agent tasks.
Exactly. We should probably put that as actionable guidance.
If you have M3 Ultra-level unified memory, Nemotron 3 Super at Q4 quantization is positioned as comfortable. If you have M4 max-level memory, it may still work at aggressive quantization, but you should plan careful load tests. That's where people should resist the temptation to assume identical behavior.
Good call, because a lot of users make a one-line command jump and assume all local environments are equivalent.
They are not. Hardware clash changes the entire reliability curve. Same for GeForce RTX users. Nemotron 3 Nano 4B is the family piece that maps better there.
And when people ask which local model should I try first, a better answer now is, match your hardware profile, then match your use case.
Exactly. For long context multimodal workflows on RTX, Qwen 3.527B at this stage has strong practical relevance, especially with native vision and the 262,000 token context in that context.
So the episode summary is becoming clear.
Right, local AI this week is not about a single monolithic winner. It's about hardware-aware model families, improved local execution, and an ecosystem where OpenClaw now sits in front of major platform investment.
Add to that, the v2026.3.13-1 polish layer means we don't lose what we gained in speed.
Yep. Stability fixes are what let strategy gains survive day-to-day use.
I think the right takeaway for most OpenClaw users is very practical. Keep exploring, but keep your expectations honest.
If you're on premium hardware, test Nemotron 3 Super and Qwen 3.5 quickly and systematically.
If you're not, keep your hybrid model and plan upgrades based on actual ROI, not headline chasing.
And if you're building or maintaining agents, appreciate that these updates reduce the hidden maintenance costs, context continuity, thread behavior, workspace consistency, replay efficiency.
Those are the things that make teams continue using the system week after week.
Exactly. So we can close with that practical note: local AI is getting serious enough for enterprise framing, and the OpenClaw community gets the benefit when that seriousness translates into stable releases.
That's it for this episode. Keep testing, keep building, and keep your workflows flexible. OpenClaw Daily Episode 13, March the 19th, 2026 *.